Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Photo EQR podcast. My name is Elliot, and I'll be your host for this podcast. Today is our first official stream, but you may have caught us doing a few test streams before in the past few weeks. But today's going to be our first official podcast. That we kind of put some posters out around the school. And we're hoping to get a few people in live today. At the moment, we still got no official people watching live, but that's all right. If no one joins live, this will be still a good little YouTube video that will go up, and that you as students or as non-students and just people interested in photography can relate to and hopefully learn something about. As today's our first official podcast, I'm going to start by doing a bit of an introduction into what this podcast is and what we kind of hope it will become as well, before transitioning over to a bit of a LightRoom Classic demo. Why don't we get started? Maybe. All right, so I think we're live. I'm trying to get confirmation from some colleagues of mine to make sure everything's working, like audio and everything. But I'm just going to assume that we are functioning and working and start. So as I said, my name is Elliot. I've been a photo tech here at the Academy of Art University for the past 3 years. But surprisingly, I've actually been doing photography for the past 10 years. Surprising to me, that's to say. It's kind of amazing to say it out loud. I've been doing photography since 2015. I specialize mostly in digital photography and printing. But I have my BA in photography. And have a pretty good understanding of everything from digital to film to editing. I even have done some video work and stuff in the past. So I have a pretty good and broad range of knowledge related to photography. I'm hoping through this podcast to, pass it down to you students and be able to hold these weekly episodes and podcasts. So as I said, we're hoping to do these weekly episodes. Each week we're hoping to kind of focus on a different topic. This week we're going to try doing a Lightroom demo, as I said. Next week I think we're going to maybe do Capture One, but we'll try to do maybe some live demos as well. Some live lighting demos, and maybe some camera comparisons. Comparing Canon cameras to Sony cameras. We got a few ideas planned out, but we're also trying to, get student feedback and feedback from our viewers. So if you guys have any ideas of what you might want to learn about or have a podcast about, we definitely encourage you to put it in the chat, or, leave a comment down below, or send us an email at photo equipment email that we got. That's photoequipment@academyart.edu. So the idea behind this podcast was really that we get, as techs, me and the 3 others, 4 of us in total, we get a lot of students coming to us with questions related to photography that don't quite fit in with what a lot of, that don't quite fit what you would go to a professor about. Maybe, it's something related to an assignment you're working on that you don't quite understand and you need help with, or maybe it's something that's just not taught in class at all, something more artistic like a double exposure photography, or alternate process, those classes are sometimes taught. We have an alternate process class, but it's not taught every semester. And on the other hand, there's stuff like, as I said, double exposures that, it's a fun, cool topic, but not really big enough topic for an entire class. So it kind of just gets skipped over. And that stuff we're hoping to kind of fill in here with the podcast, fill in that kind of bit of a knowledge gap we've kind of come to realize is here at the university. Our goal is to try to make this a live podcast with live viewers. It's not happening today, so I think everyone will be seeing this as a YouTube video, which is fine, of course. But the goal and the hope is that one day this will be a live podcast with you students watching and participating, asking questions in chat, getting live answers and feedback directly from me, your host, or one of the other EQR Texas. I have to take a week off, and hold these discussions and talk about photography and learn about photography together and in a much more interactive way than a lot of you, especially if you're an online student, might experience. So yeah, that's kind of the goal, and we'll just do our best and hopefully get some engagement from you guys and try to turn this into something. So with that said, as I said, I think we're going to just do a quick Lightroom demo today, especially if no one joins us live. We'll pretty much just do the demo, leave it there, and yeah, we'll take it from there. So let me go ahead and try to share the screen. I've had some mixed luck with this in the past, but let me share. We're going to get some crazy looking stuff. I'm going to double check that it's working because we've had some trouble with our screen sharing. So let me double check. All right, I don't actually see the stream. There we are. All right, looks like it's working. Got our confirmation. Sorry about that. I'm just, we've done a decent amount of tests, but I want to make sure everything's working. Especially with no one in chat, we can't get super, I can't just be like, hey, in chat. Make sure everything's good for me. One day, hopefully we'll get there with a decent amount of students showing up every week, asking questions and participating, as I said. As well as, we got a few podcast episodes planned, but we're also looking for more ideas on what you guys want us to focus on. So you can send us your ideas for different podcast episodes, and we might do them. There's a good chance, in fact. So as I said, we're going to start with Lightroom today. And you'll see we're not actually in Lightroom yet. You might see Lightroom's hiding behind here. But the reason we're starting with Lightroom and LightRoom Classic, to be more specifically, is because we've got a lot of students asking us a lot of questions about Lightroom. Everything from where to download Lightroom, to importing, basic edits, what all the different tabs and modules in Lightroom do, and which ones are the most important, how to export. We get a lot of questions about metadata and what metadata is, and that's something we can see and look at in Lightroom Classic. And so that's what we're going to focus on and talk about today. So to answer the first question, where to actually download Lightroom? And the answer for that is you have to download another program called Adobe Creative Cloud first. And once you're in Adobe Creative Cloud acts as a big place for all your Adobe apps to hide everything from Lightroom to Photoshop to video software like Adobe Premiere, Adobe After Effects, Adobe Illustrator. It's all here, and it can all be managed through Adobe Creative Cloud. You can technically download these programs individually without Adobe Creative Cloud straight from, the internet. But we definitely recommend downloading the entire cloud and getting this good little hub on your desktop or on your computer where you can manage all of the applications. Even if you're using only one or two, even if you're using just Lightroom and Photoshop, I definitely recommend downloading the entire Creative Cloud. And that doesn't necessarily mean downloading every Adobe program. It's just the main hub where you can manage these programs. As you can see, we have Lightroom here. We searched it. And we can see we have LightRoom, LightRoom Classic, LightRoom Web, and LightRoom Mobile, the 4 different versions of LightRoom that are available. And you can see we can install 2 of them here. We can install LightRoom. It's not installed currently. And we have LightRoom Classic currently installed. LightRoom Web is obviously a web-based thing, and LightRoom Mobile is for your phone. So we can install them here. But this works as a great place to organize and see what Adobe applications you have, which ones are installed, and which ones are up to date. So this is definitely a place to start. Even if you have Lightroom downloaded, but without the Creative Cloud, if you download it directly from the web, I definitely recommend going and downloading Adobe Creative Cloud as well. Sadly, this is a school computer, so our apps are all managed by the admins, which is why it looks like that for us. But hopefully, you guys will see that a little better. Once you open Lightroom Classic, it'll look like this. If you're seeing something different than this, you're most likely in one of the other versions of Lightroom, probably that first version that wasn't installed that's just called Lightroom. And that is actually a cloud-based version of Lightroom that we don't really teach at this school, mostly because it's a bit of a lighter version, doesn't offer everything that Lightroom Classic does. So you definitely want to be looking in Lightroom Classic, the full and complete version that we teach here at the school. So you might be asking yourself, what is Lightroom for? And the answer is Lightroom is really a place to organize your photography. That is pretty much the key to Lightroom. Lightroom is an organizational tool with some other things with it. You can do some basic edits. You can print from Lightroom. You can do some fun things like bookmaking and stuff through Lightroom. But at the core, Lightroom is all about organizing your work. And you can see that here on the side. And so we'll go through the different steps. You'll see we're in the library tab now. And there's all of these to go through. We'll spend a bit of time on library develop. And we'll do a little demo and print, not an actual printing demo, but a contact sheet demo. And we'll kind of gloss over, show, but not go into too much detail on the rest, because they're a bit more niche, bookmaking is a pretty niche use for Lightroom for sure. But before we do anything, we definitely got to import some photos. So we're going to import and go over the different methods to import. We're going to go down here, find some files. These are some photos I took over spring break. Went up into the mountains and did some photography. So we will be importing these. They are already on my hard drive, the EQR podcast hard drive I got for this podcast. I put them in the raw folder. So we're not taking them directly off a memory card or anything. They're already right where we need them to be. And that is perfect for the add function. Add, if we hold over this, which sometimes can get a description. But yeah, add photos to catalog without moving them. And that is exactly what it does. It does not move them. It simply adds them to Lightroom, which is what we will do, but we'll go through the rest of them as well. Move, you'll see we get a new tab on the right where we can move them to. Move photos to a new location and add them to a catalog. This is a great function if you want to move them from one hard drive to the next, or you accidentally put them on your desktop and you want to put them on your external hard drive. You can move them and import at the same time. You can do this with an SD card as well. You can move them off the SD card and onto your computer or your external hard drive. But often I'll actually recommend you copy off the SD card instead of move. That way they're still on the SD card, at least for a little while until you can back them up. Copy is similar to move, but it copies obviously instead of moves, so they don't get deleted from that original location. This is typically what I will use when I'm shooting or moving photos into Lightroom directly off a card. And finally, you have copy as DNG. This, of course, is essentially the same as copy, but it adds in a third step where it copies it to a new location. It imports them into Lightroom, and then it'll convert it to a DNG, which stands for digital negative. So for today, as I say, we will be doing add. We have no need to move them to another location, but if you did need to do it, you select the photos that you want to move here on the left, and you can choose on the right the destination you want them to go to. So, if we wanted to move them to the desktop, we could, but we have no need to do that. So we're just going to do add and import. And hopefully it goes pretty quickly. We only have 22, and we're not, as I said, we're not copying them or converting them to DNGs or anything. So it goes pretty fast. Once they're in there, you get them in this view. You can double click on any of them and kind of scroll through the different ones that we have. Here are some bear prints hiking out in the snow. Once there, you'll see we have our catalog setting here. This is part of our organization. We have all photographs, which of course right now this is all that's in here in our previous import. We go down, we have our folders. Our folders is essentially a perfect match for our hard drive. It mirrors what our hard drive looks like, and essentially it is our hard drive. If we make a change in our folders here in Lightroom, it will apply those changes to the hard drive. So if we add a folder here and we move files around, it will be affecting the hard drive and the structure we've set up on our hard drive. So if that is your intention, this is a great tool to organize your files once in Lightroom. If you want to reorganize your hard drive, you will need to do it through Lightroom. If you do it outside of Lightroom and come back in, your Lightroom catalog will be totally destroyed and you have to re-find everything, which can take a few hours. But yeah, it's essentially showing you what your hard drive looks like. It is a perfect mirror. If you want to organize beyond that, we have collections. And collections exist only inside of Lightroom. They don't exist on your hard drive. And so you see, we have here podcast week 1, and we can drag all of these photos into there. And as I said, it doesn't affect our hard drive. It's simply an organizational tool within Lightroom. And we can create, in theory, pretty much an infinite amount of these. If we want, for all of our landscape, one for all of our portraits, we want a collection for all of our black and whites. If we want a collection for every photo we shoot in camera, we can do all of that right here. But for now, we're going to keep it simple. I'm going to leave these all here in podcast week 1, and maybe we'll go ahead and add them to all except the bear prints, because bear prints aren't really a landscape to our landscape file. There we go. We've already started organizing a bit. Finally, on the left, we have publish services. This is, something you can set up. It can save you some time if you want to set up a publishing service, so you can, take your file directly into, Adobe Stock or Flickr. And that can save you a little bit of time. Not something I mess around with much. So we'll kind of gloss over it for now. But no, it's there. Definitely, pay attention to it. On the right side, up the top, we have our histogram, of course. showing us how well exposed we are, and all that. Below that, we have all of these different settings. So we'll start with the first one, quick develop. This is essentially what it is. It's a way to quickly develop your photographs, do a quick edit, essentially. You can choose your white balance here. You can apply some presets if you want. All these are presets that come with Lightroom, but there's not much you can do. And I definitely recommend kind of leaving this be, not touching it much, and just developing your photos in the develop module. Next is keywording, and keywording is an important part of Lightroom. In a lot of ways, it is the key part of Lightroom. Being able to have all your photos in a single place in a Lightroom catalog, have them all keyworded so you can find them as easily as possible. Lightroom is only as good of an organizational tool as you make it. And keywording is definitely one of those things that takes time, but will definitely pay off. So why don't we select all of these and do some nice broad keywords that will affect them all. And we can do, these are all landscapes. And you can separate keywords just with a comma. These are all in winter. There's snow in all of them. They're in a forest. We got trees. We can think about colors. There's a good amount of white in here. All these are shot on my Canon R6, all the same camera. I think all the same lens as well. Honestly, I don't know that, so we won't add that. But you can think of things that apply to all of them. And by selecting all of them, we can apply these keywords to all at once. If there's one that's more specific, like these with smoke, we found a burning tree and it's a little odd. We think it was a bit of a controlled burn. We can keep going, I thought we applied them to all, maybe not. If we go here, we could add, there's some smoke. We smell smoke correctly. There's a fire, there's burning. And you can keep going. We won't spend too much time doing this. This is kind of the key way to organize your work and to be able to find work, from years past. In 5 years, when I'm like, I want that photo, the burning log in the forest. I can search for it, find it, print it, send it to a client, whatever I might need it for. Below that, we have metadata. That's something we definitely get a lot of questions about from students, something a lot of people new to photography don't fully understand. And that's understandable. It's a pretty bit of an abstract thing, that's kind of hidden behind every photograph. But essentially what it is it's data that your camera captures every time you take a photograph. And it captures a lot of data, more than you might think. It captures everything from the exposure settings, your ISO, shutter speed, aperture, captures the camera itself, what camera was this taken on, the megapixels, the lens you shot on, the exact focal length you were at, if you have a zoom lens. It captures it. All of this information. It captures the date and time the photo was taken. It captures the location if you have your GPS set up. And it captures all of this behind the scenes without you having to really do anything. The one exception, of course, there's a few exceptions, sorry about that. And that's, your date and time. You have to set your date and time when you first get a camera. If you do that incorrectly, your date and time might be a little messed up. If your camera has like a GPS built in, you gotta set your GPS up accurately. But other than that, pretty much everything is automatic and just built in to your files. And we can see that here and all that data right here. We can click on one of these and we can see, this was captured March 23rd. We can see our pixel dimensions here. We can see our shutter speed, f-stop. So, it was shot at 30 millimeters on a Canon R6, 20 megapixel file. Our camera and lens combination right there. This was on 24 to 105. And we're zoomed in just a bit to 30 millimeters. See the serial number of the camera right there. You really prove it's yours, You can see the time, 11:45 a.m. And that's not all you can see. You can actually go in here and you can add any of these. Crop, was it cropped? What are the camera lens settings? What's the X and Y focal plane resolution? What's your focus distance? If you want to know your focus distance, we could check box that box. And you can go through, and almost all of this is captured automatically and saved. It's just a matter of going through and finding it here. We just added our focus distance. It should be somewhere in here. Oh, yeah, there it is. Focus distance was set to infinity. And you can change a few things. You can give it a title if you want. You want this to have a title. And a caption. You can give your photos a title and caption here that will follow them. Even if you post them on the internet, and someone downloads it off your website, somewhat illegally doing that. All of this is there to prove that it's your work. You can add your copyright information here. It's definitely something to look at. It's definitely a good thing to double check that it's coming in correctly, that the camera set up and that your date and time is accurate. And that's kind of it. Comments, you can put a few comments in if you want. For some reason, it's not supported on the school computer. But if you want to put some comments in for individual photos that you can see, you can add them there. They, once again, a bit more organization. The next tab, of course, if we move over, is our Develop tab. I don't go back. From here, we have a few different ways to organize. We can flag. We have different ways to view, as you saw. We have our grid here. We have single photo here. We have a comparison here. We can compare different photos. I want to compare these ones. If you want to compare more than one, though, or more than two, you'll need this one that shows 3 with the dots. And you can select as many as you want, by holding Shift. Compare all of those. We can go, all right, let's see them all at the same time. Typically, if you want that, this way is better. But, if you want to compare just 2 that are very similar, then you can do Shift Tab to get rid of these sidebars to see them as big as possible. Then there, you can be, which one do I like? I like the one with the road, the leading line. This one's maybe on the right. It's a little too flat for me. The left one is better, Then you have some ways to rate your work. You have, we go back to just one, maybe. Okay, we're there. different ways to organize capture time, rating, all this different stuff you can play with. If you want a filter, you can put a filter on. There's not much we can do there. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. Up here is where you can actually put in your text to search through or use metadata to find. I want all the photos with this camera and with that lens combination. Would have been good if I shot these on more than one lens maybe, but I'm pretty stuck in my ways. I like my camera and lens combo. I don't change much. Once we go here, we have our editing tab. On the left, we have all of the presets. These are all of the presets that just come built in with Adobe LightRoom Classic. But you can create a preset if you want and have it in here. It'll show up on the bottom. These are sometimes a decent way to get a start to your edit. You can scroll through and see different ways that the photo can look by the end. But typically, it's always a starting place and not an ending place. Now, as we scroll through these, you can see the different directions we could potentially take this photo. But yeah, so presets are here on the left. But most of your editing will be done here on the right side. What you start with here is all of your global adjustments. And by global adjustments, I mean they affect the entire photo or everything in the photo that relates to their subject matter. So the first two will affect everything. Exposure, either it changes your entire exposure in the photo, going from anywhere from a -5 to a +5. So maybe we think we're a bit underexposed. Our histogram does kind of show that. We're a little underexposed. So maybe we push our exposure a bit. Maybe we want a little more contrast across the entire photograph. But we're getting a little bit of maybe clipping in the whites in some of these snowy areas, like right here. We're probably getting some clipping, so we want to pull our highlights down. And this, as I said, affects everything within their category. So this affects all the highlights. This won't affect the shadows much or at all, but it'll affect every highlight in the photograph. And same with shadows. We want some more detail in these trees. See more of the moss here. And then you have white and black to control your white and blacks. Typically, I like to hold Option or Alt down to show you everything that's blown out. We see we already have some blown out white, so there's no real need to push it up. But I also don't recommend going below 0, So we're just going to leave that. We'll maybe a bit of some deeper blacks in there. Then you got texture and clarity and all that, and dehaze. We can, give us some extra clarity. Maybe one little texture. And we have our very basic, we have our vibrance and saturation. We can push our vibrance up a bit if we want some, more colors in our photo. Or we can drop it all the way down and make it look very moody. And if we do saturation, we'll turn it into a black and white. But I think, this is a end of winter, start of spring photo. So we're gonna maybe make it look a little brighter. And we can go through all of these. All of these are global adjustments to a certain degree. Your tone, if you do a little tone curve, will affect the entire photo. Again, it's similar to what we did above, where it's affecting all the highlights, but or all the shadows, depending where in the curve you're adjusting shadows, darks, whites, highlights, depending where you are in the curve. But it's affecting the entirety of the photograph in regards to that. Your color mixer, you have your old-fashioned one, which has been around for years, with your hues, saturation, and luminance in regards to the color channels here. We also have your newer one where you can get your pointer out, and pick a point. I want the greens, and these trees. I want to affect just that color. I want that color to be, let's say we don't want to change the hue at all. We just want to saturate it more. Or we want it to darken or brighten up a bit, let's brighten up all the greens a bit. This is definitely a cool tool, but just pick the colors you want to work on. That is a little too white at the moment. We probably have to go over there a bit. We can shift our hue here in a more blue direction. Saturate it a bit for our sky, and we probably want a slightly darker sky than brighter. And you can keep going through all of these. There's definitely some color grading is a little more advanced, where you can choose a color for different parts of your, you want your midtones to be blue and cool looking, while your highlights are warm. There's definitely a lot to play with in Lightroom. As I said, this is a pretty beginner tutorial. So feel free to play around with all of these. The last one I'll maybe point out really is lens correction. This is a way for Lightroom to automatically correct any distortion a lens might have. The selection of lenses they have is pretty darn wide. It covers pretty much every modern digital lens, as well as a decent amount of older lenses as well. It'll correct the distortion as you see. As we turn it off, we get some bending around the edges. Turn it on, we got a nice flat image. All right. And there's definitely a lot to play with, as I say. If we want a more in-depth Lightroom editing, let us know in the comments, and we'll do our best to do that. Up top, of course, you have your other options. You have cropping. You can crop here. It automatically sets to where you can change the ratio at will. Typically, I recommend not doing that and having the lock here locked. And the ratio here 1:1. You want a square. You want one to match your normal 8.5 by 11 US paper size. You want 16 by 9. Cinematic look. You can do that, but I definitely recommend sticking to an aspect ratio and not choosing some, completely random thing like that. This looks like a square, but is it? Probably not. That's an actual square. So it can be hard to tell if you leave it off. What is a perfect ratio and not. And it doesn't matter, especially, whether you're posting these to Instagram or a website. It's good to match the ratio they ask for, and especially if you're printing your work or giving it to a client, they'll typically want it in a certain ratio, and you'll want to definitely make sure it matches and is solid. The next one, we have our helium. This will remove dust spots off of our image. You know, if you got some dust on your lens or on your sensor, you can take it off. There's a few different options. This one here, I think, is AI. It uses generative. You can use generative AI to do it. Not great. Hopefully the AI gets better and it'll work better eventually. Typically, I stick with Heal. This allows you to pick an area. You know, if we want to zoom in here, down here, let's say we want to get rid of one of, like this branch over here, we can select that and get rid of it, you know. A clone stamp will clone it from another area, so you have to select the point you want to clone from and then clone it over. The eye is a red eye removal. If you're, you know, for a landscape like this, there's really no point in doing it, obviously. But actually, that's eye now and red eye. But obviously, if this is a landscape, there's no eye there. Finally, you have your selective adjustment. Sorry, I can't speak today, it seems. And this is where you can pick a certain area and edit only that one little area. You know, the most obvious, you have your subject. If there's a subject you want to select, a person, you know, in a portrait, or, you know, your object in your still life, you know. Sky can work, you know, if we do sky selection here for our landscape, it'll automatically detect our sky as best it can. It's pretty hard with the trees, but then when we adjust it, it'll adjust only the sky. It's not adjusting anything else except the areas that are painted red that you can see there. You know, and you can keep going, create a new one. You know, if you want to brush in an area, you know, maybe you want to brush in our tree here. We can change our size here, or with I honestly don't know what they're called, but you can change your brush here, or how much you want to feather. If you see when we go big, that second ring, you know, our middle ring is what we're painting, and then it feathers out to that second ring. If we got rid of that, took it to 0, you'd see we have just one ring and a solid brush. But typically you want a decent, at least some feathering. And then flow and density work together to control how much of your edit is actually applied. You know, so if we want our tree brighter, let's say we want to bring the shadows up on our tree here, we could take a brush and paint that in. Obviously, it's pretty sloppy, but I think it gets the point across. LightRoom does this to a decent extent, being able to do these more precision adjustments. But definitely for the highest precision, you'll want to move into Photoshop to do these types of adjustments at the highest quality. So as we move on, we have our next module. I know we spent a lot of time in the first two, so we'll kind of go a bit more quickly now. We have our map. This is an interesting one I've never really used, but it's an interesting idea for sure, where you can use GPS data in your metadata to pinpoint where all your photographs were taken, and this map or share this map with other people. It's an interesting idea. I honestly can't quite see the real reason to do this, maybe for or something, you can send maps out or sell them somehow to people and be like, yeah, this is the photo you get. It's definitely a way to organize your photos a little more, you can simply be like, oh, Yosemite, what photos have I taken there that are, it's just interesting. I'm curious if anyone out there watching has used it. It can give me some more, give me and anyone watching or reading the comments some more advice on why you and what professional use it does have. Because interesting, I take professional use for it. Bookmaking, on the other hand, is definitely a cool one. With an obvious and use to it, way to make a book. You can organize a book, put it together. Right here in Lightroom, it doesn't require exporting at all. A lot of times you'll import your photos, edit them, export them, upload them to a bookmaking website, put the book together, realize, oh, I want a different crop on that photo, have to go out, and repeat the entire process. It can be quite a pain. The ability to do it all here in Lightroom is definitely something that's nice to have. There's no doubt about that. Slideshow, again, is pretty similar to book. You put together a little slideshow, add things, you want, a shadow behind it, how deep, what's the offset, you got text and stuff with the identity plate, text overlay if you need it. Another similar to book, it's an interesting idea. One I personally haven't played around with it much. And I think you'll find that 90% of photographers who use Lightroom use library, develop, and don't touch the others. And I think that's fine, and I think it's what most people do. If you're good, if you use book or map or slideshow, you use these tabs, that's all the better for you. And if you want us to go into detail, do a podcast episode on, how to use the map function, or the book function, or the slideshow function. We'll do a little bit of research ourselves. Maybe do a future podcast if we're asked for it. Print is where obviously you can print your work out. And we'll go into a little more detail there. As I said, we're going to do a little demo there actually. So we'll skip it for now and go to web. Web is where you can pretty much do a website design. You can upload it to a server, so you can pretty much build your website right here, upload it to a server, and it's pretty interesting again, you can choose your grid here. You want a big grid for all 22 photographs. You can play around with the layout, I think, in different ways. You can choose your templates over here. You want a light template, can create that. How high of your quality is it? Does your copyright stay there? Pretty interesting. Let's go back to print because while printing is definitely fun, there's actually more you can do in the print module than just print. And that is, as you see, print to file. And it's an interesting way to export to some degree your photograph. But more specifically, this is where you create a contact sheet. I know a lot of students have questions about how to create contact sheets. They come to us a lot because it's hidden in this area of LightRoom Classic, hidden in the print module. And what it is essentially it's a template that you have to do. And there's a few different ones, but you can use any one of these contact sheet templates. to create a contact sheet, if you want a 4x5 contact sheet, a 5x8, 5x9, 5x11, just depends how many photographs you need on that contact sheet. And this is a great way to, create a little, one sheet, whether it's a physical thing that you actually print, or a digital thing, you print the file and send it to your client. You pick out your top 10 or top 20 in this case and send them to your client so they can pick out, the 5 they want printed or something. Being able to create a contact sheet is definitely worth it. If you want to be more, you can customize it a bit here with the layout. You can add more or less grids, you can increase or decrease the different margins, if you want to bottom weight a bit. You can. It already is, it looks like, defaulted to have a bit of a weight there. Whether you want to show the guides or not, you can all do it here. Let's say we want no guides. One of the most important things is what file info you have. You can do a custom text, and put your custom text in here. If you want, you can do the equipment. It shows you all the different equipment we have. If you want the exposure, it shows you the exposure. And for whatever reason, it's exposure without ISO. I don't fully understand why. But if you want exposure with ISO, you can do that through the edit, and you can see all these different things that you could add under or with your contact sheet. So as you see, we have exposure here, and it's check mark. But if we want something else, if we want our ISO speed rating, we can add that as well. We could add as much as we want, though, it'll get cluttered if we add too much. And hit done, and now we have our full exposure, 1/25th, at f8, ISO 125. And then when you're ready, you can print the file and save it, to where you need to save it to. And we can give this a name, Fraser Falls, contact sheet, and save it there. So that's how you do a contact sheet. It's pretty simple once you find the location to do it at. But if you're like here in the develop module, or you're trying to export and do it here in the export tab, it doesn't quite work like that. It's hidden in an interesting place in the print module. But that is essentially LightRoom Classic. As I said, at a glance, that is LightRoom Classic. It's a pretty deep program. There's definitely a lot we didn't cover today. If you want a deeper dive into Lightroom, I think we could definitely do that. We have a print team podcast planned. We'll see if we can actually pull it off. That means probably doing the podcast not in the studio and going down to the print lab to do it. And typically it's something we actually do in Photoshop and not through Lightroom, but both ways are doable. Our next podcast, I think, will either be a deep dive into Lightroom development, or a Capture One comparison, where we kind of do the same thing we did today, but in Capture One, which is a similar program to Lightroom, but has its differences, has its pros and cons. So let me stop share, get back to our stream there. And yep, there we are. All right, so that is, I think, going to wrap up our podcast. So thanks for watching. As I said, we're trying to get as much engagement as possible. So if you can join us live in the future, that'll be great. Leave your thoughts and comments down below. And if you have ideas for future podcasts, definitely let us know, either in the comments or email us again at photoequipment@academyart.edu. And hopefully we'll see you soon. All right, have a good day, and bye.